Hey everyone, it's Mr. Lynn. When you're watching this, it's going to be day 40 of our quarantine, and this video is actually recorded a couple days in advance. So today, this video is wrapping up our music composition series with an interview that I did with an old friend of mine. Kim Edwards and I went to Moravian together. Since then, she has recorded 3 albums and has a fourth on the way. She has opened for Jars of Clay and the Beach Boys. She's been featured in Huffington Post. She was a cover story for Performer magazine. Her music can be heard in ads for Chico's Shoes, Disney Weddings, and Parexel. Uh, and in this interview, she says she's written over 300 songs. And I'm hoping that sometime in the future, we're going to get to do a collaboration with her and the Freedom High School Orchestra. So enjoy my interview with someone who's legitimately been doing this, writing music in the real world. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye. So, Kim, I have just finished a series of videos with my high school students talking about composing. And we kind of went through the process that I use when I'm composing for like orchestral pieces that I've done a couple of pieces for. So really, I wanted to do a little bit of an interview with you and hear your process. So let's start with a little bit of baseline. Do you have an estimate of how many songs you've written at this point?
Oh man, a lot. I probably maybe over 300, 400-ish.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and that's over years. And part of that comes from for the last 10 years, I did a songwriting challenge in January where I would try to write a song a day for the entire month of January. So that's where the
Wow.
bulk of that comes from. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. How when do you think you started writing music?
I started writing music probably around 13, 14. I was
Okay,
super into movie soundtracks. I thought I wanted to be a film composer. Um,
sure.
yeah, I was like all about John Williams. Actually, I was really all about Alan Menken, who is the composer of all the Disney films, and
Yeah.
that was my dream goal. And then that kind of morphed into songwriting, adding words. So I think I actually started writing songs a little more seriously when I was probably 15, 16-ish. And then
Okay.
that kind of snowballed and people kept saying, oh, I really like that. So I kept doing it.
Nice. So what's your process?
It varies. I know that there are a couple schools of thought when it comes to songwriting. Some people are very much like, I wait till inspiration hits, I don't write anything. And that's how I used to be, more or less. And I really wouldn't sit down unless I felt like, oh, there's something in me. Um, and then I think over the last couple of years, I've learned to try to flex the creative muscle. So challenging myself with songwriting exercises. I still enroll in workshops, songwriting workshops, where they'll be like, okay, you are going to write a song a week for the next month. And that helps light a fire under me because sometimes you just don't feel inspired. But in general, my process of late has been music first, kind of sit there. And I don't know, I sit in front of a piano for hours and play the same progression and the same melody over. So it's always a very solo process because I don't want anybody hearing me sing the same repetitive motif 30 times in a row.
Right.
But then there have been other times where I've started from a song title and you write down a list of things that sound intriguing and pick a song title, and then sometimes I'll kind of get an idea of a story or a music video in my head and write to what I think that would unfold. So yeah.
Very cool. So let's say if we were going to write a song right now,
Yeah.
what what would you want to do first? Would you probably start with just plunking around on the keyboard and finding a melody, or would you go for like a chord structure, or what
Yeah.
would you do first?
Um, I would probably sit down at the keyboard just because that's my the instrument that I'm better at. But sometimes I do change it up and start on guitar because it's not as familiar to me. And sometimes that's good because I can fall into a rut of playing the same things over and over on the piano. But usually it'll be, I would say it's usually chords, a chord structure, and then a melody slowly over top of that. And and from there, you just have to get a feel for what you think that melody is, and the emotion behind it, and the story that it's trying to tell. But yeah, I would say I write more to serve the music a lot of times rather than to until I get a message formed in my head, and then I kind of mold it. But I'm not generally one of those people that start with lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so you would also then say that like when you're composing, it's more free form, right? Like you just kind of let it feel out. How much do you ever rely on the theory side of like
Um,
do you ever like get into that rut and be like, you know what, this piece, what's wrong with this chord progression? I'm gonna get my like. Do you ever go that route?
I do. I do actually, because I get really bored with the same four chords that is so prevalent in the
Uh-huh.
music industry today. And so I kind of pride myself on being able to do something, at least in different spots, to be able to do totally different chord structure and progression. And there have been times where I've cracked open a theory book where it has like, well, the two chord goes here and then jumps over the, you know, it's like, I don't know. I think that's the thing that's been so intriguing. If you listen to a piece like Claire de Lune and the story that it tells, and then it comes back around and the different themes and motifs, but it's infinitely more interesting than than the same four chords over and over again.
Yeah.
I like to challenge myself by putting those things in there where it's a little if it's harder for you to pick out and play, sometimes that's what I like.
Okay.
Like
Nice.
Beach Boys, for instance, they it's very hard sometimes to break down a Beach Boys song. Like aside from the Cars song, aside from the Surfer songs, if you sit there and you try to figure out how to play God Only Knows, like good luck on your first try
Yeah.
because yeah, but it's one of the greatest songs in history and it's one that modulates all over. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I not too long ago came across the YouTube video where they isolated the vocals on Beach Boys songs, and you just listen to it and go, "Oh my God, that is so one so perfectly in tune before auto tune,
Yeah.
and so intricate and interesting." Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So you said you do a lot of like a lot of pieces, a lot of work. How often do you go back and rework?
Not as often as I probably should. I think it depends. Of all those 300, 400 songs that I've written, most of those are fragments. For me, I'll consider it a song if I write a verse and a chorus. And to me, that's like, okay, I've got the starting part right there. Sometimes I've gone back through and listened to them and been like, oh, okay, there's something there. I want to finish it. And but as far as revisions go, um, I've tried to be more open to editing. I think what happens for me is when I get into a song, I I'm so into it that by the time it gets to the stage where it's on the paper and I've scribbled and written things out, like I've edited it so many times in my mind. And I'm like, well, there it is. It's pretty much it's done. But I've done something recently where I've been sort of under a songwriting mentorship from these two artists that I respect. And so we've been meeting online and doing like a Skype session. And I'll send them the songs and they kind of pick it apart in a good way and just give me little tweaks of improvements here. And some of it's like, try this word because it starts on a vowel and it'll be a little easier to sing. And like all those little tiny tweaks that really do make a song better and kind of tighter. So I think it's great to be open to revising your work, um, especially if it can be improved. There's some songs that I still probably selfishly think of as my babies that I don't need anybody's opinions. Like I've already tried as much as I can to do it. But I think it's still great to be at least open to the idea of improving.
So that's another thing. The modern industry has really shifted from the old days of it's like this is my song, I wrote it by myself for my group, right? To now they're very collaborative efforts, right? So
Yeah.
I would assume, going from writing as early as 15 to now, like you've probably done like that full gambit of working on things completely by yourself
Hmm.
to the full collaborative efforts. What do you think are kind of the advantages and drawbacks to both?
When you write by yourself, some of it really comes down to who you're writing for. Are you writing for yourself as an artist? Are you writing for another person as an artist? Are you writing to pitch to any number of artists? Um, and that's where you sort of have to adjust how you are. So when I write for myself, it's very much like this is just you know what I'm happy with and what it means to me personally. But then when I've done co-writes, you sort of have to get on the same page with somebody else, and it has to make sense to the both of you. Um, and I think that you just have to put your ego aside and know what better serves the song and what is a more universal message, especially if you're writing for a pop artist. Like it has to be accessible by everybody. And there's sometimes it's like the difference between writing, you know, a Bon Iver song versus, a I don't know, an Alessia Cara song or something like that. And being willing to go into these weird places with Bon Iver, and you're like, I don't even know what lyrics. What do these mean? But it's okay because I want to read whatever I want to read into them because it's Bon Iver. Like I don't care. Um, I think the benefits of working with somebody else is that you have so many more minds to draw from. And so creating something with one co-writer, two, three, four co-writers, it can be really great because you just have all these different pieces, like the best of everybody, you bring to the table and you come out with like a banger. Um, but on the other hand, it is tough because sometimes you have to be careful of too many cooks in the kitchen trying to do all the things at once. And so what often will happen is like maybe you'll collaborate with a couple people, but it's in stages. And so maybe you write with someone and you get pretty far, and then you're like, well, is it okay if I take this over to my friend who's a producer, adds beats or whatever, and they take it over there, and you're kind of invited to listen after to see if you like it. And so in that stage, rather than everybody at once, it all depends. It's often not just one session. It's over many sessions that a song can be completed. So yeah.
So does that usually work that like one person comes up with like a chord structure and or like somebody else comes up with a melody? I can't even wrap my mind around that.
It depends. There's something called toplining, where you have a producer who pretty much has a track and it's all just the chords. And then you bring somebody else in who's a top liner and they just start singing melodies. And, there's some really good top liners. I have a friend, her name is, or somebody that I used to write with, April Bender, and she's just great at it. And she's written songs that we've probably heard in different artists. And I'm amazed by people like that who can just pull out like a really hooky melody out of thin air and just like, what? Where did you come from? But in times where I've written, I think there have been times where I've brought the chord structure and a story idea, and somebody else has brought like, well, this might be a cool way to say it. So, but it can go back and forth. It's weird. I feel like co-writes are kind of like a weird first date. It's all about how you mesh with the person and if you like are creative. Just because you have these two people that are really good at what they do doesn't mean you're going to come out with a good song. I think a lot of times it's how you work with somebody and if you feel comfortable with them and you know it's a largely relational, believe it or not.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for spending some time and some insight with us. Any last thoughts, advice to any of the high school kids maybe that want to start writing some pieces?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest thing is um, to write try to build discipline into yourself. It's hard sometimes you don't feel inspired, but one of the best things you can do is just get in the practice of writing and being creative, even just a little bit every day. If you think of it as a muscle that you flex, the best thing is to just keep at it. And then when inspiration does strike, you're ready for it. You've already put in the reps and you've already built the tools. And then when it happens, it's this beautiful, rubber meets the road moment where you're well equipped and you can take your creative vision wherever you want because you've already put the work in.
Great. So, if the students want to hear your stuff or get a hold of you, what should they do? How can they find you?
They can find me. My website is kimedwardsmusic.com. They can find me on Spotify. Just search Kim Edwards. And then also, I'm probably more active on Instagram and Twitter, which is my handle is just Kim Edwards Music.
All right.
Yeah.
And you have what, two albums, three?
I've got two albums out, a third one I'm working on right now, and
Exciting.
actually a single coming out hopefully this summer. But yeah, I've got a couple singles on there to check out.
All right. Well, we'll make sure to crank that out there to the kids once that happens.
Sweet.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. It was great seeing you, and best of luck with the new CD.
Thanks, Andy. See you.
See ya.